to Off the Page, the show where we talk with Colorado authors to get the story behind the story. I'm Stacy McKenzie, a librarian here at Mamie Doud Eisenhower Public Library in Broomfield, and today we have two wonderful authors. Later on we'll be talking with Stan Moore, but first I have Anne Marie with us. Hi Anne Marie, how are you?
I'm very good, thank you.
Wonderful to have you on the show, and we're going to be talking about your book Letters to Anne, the Korean War 1950 to 1951. Now Marie, before we get started, I'd like to ask you, what do you do when you're not publishing books? Do you have another career?
Well, I used to be a trial litigation attorney, but then I semi-retired, and that gave me the absolutely perfect block of time where you could sit down and actually do a book. It's been a wonderful experience.
You really suggest that retiring is, having that time is a great time to write the book? It's tough to do with a full-time.
It is, but there are some wonderful authors out there that work full-time and they write books, and I am in awe of the amount of energy that takes to do.
It really does take a lot to put it together, and this book has so many elements that aren't normal writing, which we're going to talk about. Before we jump into talking about the actual book, can you give me and the viewers a little bit of a history on the Korean War?
Well, today it's called the Forgotten War because it just is not addressed that much in public education. And in my education, it seems like you went straight from World War II to the Vietnam War. So when we first started working on this book, I was somewhat appalled about my lack of knowledge about the Korean War. And my children, who are grown now, I asked them as well, and they had the same experience. So the Korean War is aptly named the Forgotten War. And part of that may be because it was the first war where America came home and it was not a clear-cut victory. We would see other wars later down the line that would also happen in. But the American public, it just saw it sort of push back in the psyche. So it actually was the fifth deadliest war in American history, but it is simply not addressed a great deal in the educational process.
And can you tell us anything about the conflict that got the Korean War started?
The North Koreans invaded South Korea on Sunday morning at 4 a.m. on June 25th, 1950. The war lasted for approximately 3 years. An armistice was signed on July 27th, 1953, and that ended the war, but a peace treaty was never signed by North Korea. So at this time, even today, that war has never been officially concluded. They're still at war with each other.
Wow, that's amazing right there, that big fact. So the book, you actually are not the author of the book. You say you are the editor of the book.
That is correct, because this book is a very decidedly different perspective of war. It is a series of over 100 letters which a medical officer wrote to his 4-year-old daughter, and they're humorous, and they're trying to reassure her that life goes on even in a time when life is not very pleasant for Captain John F. Hughes. But he was a medical officer. He was with the 7th Infantry Division, and he was there during some of the worst parts of the war. Some of the early parts of the war were sometimes the worst.
Well, tell me about John, your main character. What type of guy was he?
Well, he was my father-in-law, and I married his youngest child, whose name is Richard, but the Anne to whom the letters were written was his first child, Anne Isabel. And he had a wicked sense of humor. So he made fun of everything that was happening to him during the war. And once again, these are being sent to his daughter to reassure her that everything's okay, even though he's not there anymore.
Oh my goodness. And you had other people contribute to the book, with not just the letters in there, but you've got photos and other information from other people. Who else helped you with this book?
Well, the 7th Infantry Division vetted the book for me. I did not have a military background, so I did not want to make rookie mistakes. So they were very kind to go through it and look at John's letters. And most of the drawings he did, a lot of the letters are all actually sort of cartoonish looking rather than a full letter, and there's just a couple of words on them. But they said that Captain Hughes had a good hand for drawing, and that most of his drawings are pretty accurate, because he drew the gorilla, which was a howitzer, and drew other things along the line. And he actually was quite talented in that area. And then what we did is we put annotations on the letters, so when he's writing the letter, you can go back and say, oh, that's what was really happening to him in the war at the time he was writing this funny letter. And we also have historical dividers, so the reader gets a context of what part of the war the letters are occurring in and what's happening in the war at that time.
So it's almost like an immersion history in a way. It seems like you're giving so many different perspectives of this time.
It is, and one of the great things is it can be read by a child and they will not be frightened. It can also be read by a serious person who's into military history, because we have gone back and done enough of that. So it can be read on several different levels.
And it was written, the letters were written to a 4-year-old, so that lends itself to being something that a child could learn from. And you mentioned the illustrations. I would love to see some of the illustrations.
Oh, let me show you some of my favorites.
Okay, great.
One of the first ones is, obviously she's a very small child and
Right.
she's female. And so he wrote one letter in January 26th of 1950. And he says, "Everybody says you look like me. Is that true?" So he draws it so that he draws her with a beard and a mustache and stubble and dressed in uniform.
Oh, and a little one of her right there.
And so she's
Aw,
like a mini soldier there.
that is adorable.
And then some of the other things that were really sort of funny, some of these almost remind me of Coyote and Roadrunner cartoons, because they're sort of humorous at the same time they're violent, because what was happening at that time, there was violence then. And this is one of a train blowing up.
Whoa.
And there were train ambushes and sniper attacks, particularly on the hospital trains, because during this war, the Western etiquette of not targeting medical people and medical installations was not honored.
Oh.
So in this one it says, "Our train with all our food on it blew up yesterday. All we have left to eat today is candy bars." Now for a 4-year-old, just having candy bars to eat is not necessarily a bad thing. So those are some of my favorites. And that gives the tone to the book. It's a juxtaposition between funny letters and in a time which was not funny at all.
Was he writing letters to anyone else? Did he spend his time writing letters to her?
Most of them went to her, and when he wanted to tell his wife Mary, who's nicknamed Peach something, he would sort of insert it into the letter that he was writing to Anne. And Anne did write some letters back, but of course those are long gone by the wayside.
Oh my goodness.
Anne Isabel, the Anne to whom the letters were written, gave me copies in the 1980s, and they were Xerox copies. And the first time I read them, I was looking at them thinking, these are so, I've never seen anything about war that shows this perspective of war in my life. And ever since the 1980s, we've wanted to publish. But again, families, working full-time, etc., sort of got in the way. So finally, when I did semi-retire, it was time to do them. And I'm just so happy that we did them, because it is such a different perspective.
It's put together so wonderfully. And so did you self-publish this?
I did.
Because it really is put together so well. Did you have help? Did you have any advisement on that? Or are you just a naturally artistic person?
There are some parts I couldn't even begin to do. So I had this wonderful design team from Florida,
Wonderful.
Vanguard Imagery, and it's a husband-wife team, and the husband Dan designed the cover of the book, and then Darlene did the interior of the book. And I had a vision in my head where I could see the letters with annotation boxes floating on them in various positions, because the letters are all different artistically. And they really understood what I was looking for, and then did a beautiful job on doing it. They were really talented.
It really is marvelous. And so what did Anne Isbell think about the final book?
Well, she unfortunately passed on in 2006. She had severe diabetes, and she did grow up to be an artist, probably following a bit in her father's footsteps. So she never saw the book, but her daughters have been absolutely delighted with it, and it's sort of, I can still feel her smile sometimes when I look at it.
So Captain John, what kind of person was he?
Captain John survived the war. We are very pleased to report. He had 3 more children, including my husband, which I'm happy about too. And he went into psychiatry. Later in life, he actually went back and did additional training to go into psychiatry. And he unfortunately passed away also at the age of 59, which was when Anne passed her age date. But he was mowing his lawn in Dublin, Ohio. And so he's no longer with us either.
But he put together such wonderful stuff for his 4-year-old. What a great dad.
He did.
What message do you think that you would like people to take away when they read this book?
2 thoughts come to mind, and the first would be that This was the 5th deadliest war in our history, and it would be wonderful if more people were interested in the Korean War, or maybe find an interest after reading books like Letters to Anne. And secondly, that it is possible to parent from the battlefield. It's not easy by any means, because what's obviously happening to the soldiers is can't even be discussed with young children. But it is possible to maintain an emotional connection with your children from the field. And I think that's even easier with today's technology. Captain John Hughes only had pen and paper to do that, but we have so many other ways to do it. And just keeping that emotional connection, that I'm alive and you're alive, and we may be in an awful situation right now, but it can be done.
And it really is timely, the relationship between a father and the daughter. And during a wartime, we still have soldiers out there, and so this is sort of inspiration for them to keep in touch. I love that you mentioned the different technologies to do that too. What a unique book. I'm wondering if you have another book project you might be working on?
Things have come down the tubes after this book came out. There are many letters out there, and our World War II vets and our Korean War vets are all in their 80s and 90s. And so I'm constantly on the lookout for letters that have some sort of visual aspect to them as well, because they're easier to take in, I think, if there's some visual aspect to the letters as well. We have been given one set of letters from a colleague of mine that were done in World War I, and they were done by a watercolorist who was an ambulance driver in Brest. Wow. And the art alone is fabulous, even without the letters. So there's some of those floating out there, and they sort of are piquing my interest a little bit. So we'll see what happens as we go down the line.
Oh, that would be fabulous. And this book is so well put together. I can see why people
thank you.
are wanting to come to you and have you do the same with their precious memories of that. And thank you so much for being on the show. I appreciate it so much, and sharing Letters to Anne with us.
Thank you for having us.
You bet. Join us after the break when we'll be talking with Stan Moore. Where are you?
I'm just a few minutes away.
What medications do you take?
I can help you if I have the information.
Seconds count.
What if you could provide us with life-saving information before an emergency?
Now you can.
It's free, private, and secure.
Visit smart911.com to create your safety profile.
Help us help you.
Welcome back. We are here with Stan Moore, author of Over the Dam and Seesaw. Hi, Stan. How are you?
I'm doing good, thank you.
I'm so happy to have you on the show to talk about these terrific books.
My pleasure.
Give me a little bit of background on Stan Moore.
I'm a lifelong Coloradan, father, grandfather, husband. I like to spend a lot of time in the outdoors. I'm usually in the mountains or the desert Southwest when I'm not writing.
And do you have another career outside of writing?
Retired small business owner.
There you go. Wonderful. People are realizing they have more time to write their books when they retire.
Well, I'd been talking about a book for quite a while, and my wife finally called my bluff and said, well, then do it. So I started writing, and here we are.
That's a recurring theme. Let's talk about Seesaw first. It is about World War II.
Yes, November 1942, which was kind of the watershed month of the watershed year of the war. Going in, you heard a lot about Axis victories, German victories, Japanese victories. After that, you heard about a lot of their defeats and American, British, Russian victories. And it all happened, the tide turned in about a 40-day period, and they're right around November 1942.
What drew you to this specific month and year of World War II?
Well, I've been a student of the war since I was, old enough to read, and it's always fascinated me. About 6 or 8 years ago, my wife and I had the opportunity to drive the Alaskan Highway. And now it's a nice paved 3-lane road, but you can see this track of the old highway that just went straight up and over hills, through bogs, whatever. That fascinated me, so I did some research, saw that it was done from August to November of 1942, and I realized a lot of things got done in that period. And from there, developed the thesis of the book.
Oh, wow. And so the title Seesaw.
Yes.
What does that term seesaw, how does that work into the theme of your
Okay.
book?
Well, of course, the seesaw on the playground, back and forth,
Sure.
up and down. Whoever's got the more weight can control what's happening. And really, the November 1942 was the pivot point where both sides were trying to get their feet on the ground, so to speak. And the Americans, British, and Russians were able to do it and win the war.
What were some of the biggest pivot points?
Stalingrad, the Battle of Stalingrad in Russia, where the Russians cut off and annihilated 250,000 Germans who were fighting thousands of miles from home. In terms of the European land war, that was really the pivotal battle. In the Pacific, Guadalcanal, the Battle of Guadalcanal, where there was fighting over an airfield that went on for 6 months, and finally the U.S. was able to take control of the area 24 hours a day and start to roll the Japanese back up towards Tokyo.
So when we're talking about World War, we're really talking about November 42 happening in the different parts of the world.
Oh yes, this book looks at 5 different campaigns in Africa, Asia, several places in the Pacific, as well as other things. India was in revolt in the summer of 1942. The U.S. was building the Alaskan Highway. They finished the Pentagon, building bases all over the world. The Russians were building their armies up. A lot of things going on.
Now, Stan, when you're an enthusiast about a topic, it's very different than when you start putting a book together. What type of research did you have to do for the book?
I had a lot of background just in the general reading, but then I started focusing in on this period of the war, did interviews, a lot of oral histories. I was able to get some letters and diaries from men who were in some of these campaigns, from friends. So it really honed it in and brought it home. You know, I mean, it's one thing to read about the Battle of Guadalcanal, but another to read a letter from a guy who was in there fighting it.
Well, can you share some of those stories with us?
Well, a lot of that was censored, but you can read, even just read between the lines, that a lot of misery, a lot of homesickness, a lot of we got to get this job done and get home.
Yeah.
One of these guys won the Navy Cross in one of the battles in Guadalcanal, but he was very modest about it. He gives his letters maybe 2 lines to it. I learned more from his son about this, how this all happened, than he was very modest about it when he wrote home.
I hear that a lot sometimes with these big fancy medals. Do you think they feel like they're just doing their job?
Yeah, I think a lot of it is being at the right place at the right time, so to speak. That kind of bravery goes on a lot in war, but most of it isn't witnessed or isn't recognized.
And it's not something you brag about. Maybe you wear the medals, but you just don't brag about it.
Yeah, but every day is a gift, and you're just glad to be home if you got home.
I agree, and that was a tough time. World War, of course.
Yes.
For Seesaw, what's a good audience for the book that you're writing here?
People with an interest in history generally. I think now that our World War II veterans are passing, a lot of people are picking up a little more interest in this. You know, they heard stories from Great Uncle Jack or their dad or whatever, but now they're really realizing what a pivotal event this was. And so I think anybody who's interested in the history of those times,
Yeah.
and this is a fresh kind of a niche look at the war.
And I love the personal touch with some letters and some stories in there.
Yes.
That makes it really not so dense with just facts and figures.
It's down to a personal level.
A
Truly
personal
does.
level,
Yes.
true.
Yeah.
Let's jump over to your fiction book.
Okay.
We have Seesaw, which is nonfiction, and then out of the blue, we have our fiction book. Was this
Yes.
something you'd been talking about doing for a while?
Well, this is a novel based in western Colorado about eco-vigilantes. Actually, after we got Over the Dam, or excuse me, Seesaw done, and I say we because my wife did the artwork for both of these books, she said, you know, you ought to write a book with people in it, because this is very interesting for the War II fan, but women aren't going to read this. And you know, that's a stereotype, but you know, she said, you ought to think about a novel. So I kind of kicked some ideas around, and here we are.
I like your wife. I don't
So
even
do I.
know her. I like her. So you use the term eco-vigilante.
Yes.
Give us a little idea what that means.
Okay, well, you know, this country has a long history of participatory democracy, and mostly that you think of that as the vote, call your representative or whatever. But throughout the history of this country, there have been people who have taken action, literally violent action, into their hands, or go to the streets. Anything from the whiskey rebellions of the 1780s, 1790s. I don't know my exact history on that. To Martin Luther King and sending people into the streets. This is a book about some people who want to take action into their own hands, maybe not as appropriately as you might like.
And what are they fighting for?
Well, these are people who, the entire book is based around water. The use of water, how it has shaped our society, our legal system, our patterns of settlement. And there's some people in here who take exception to that. You know, the Colorado River this year, for the first time in many years, is actually running to the Gulf of Mexico. It's been dried up and sucked dry, and some people really don't like that.
Yeah, and it does take place in Colorado.
Present-day Summit County, Colorado.
Where water rights have been a big issue for a long time.
Yes.
So excellent choice. And we were talking earlier, water rights, whether you have them or you've got too much water, it's just something that has it been around in Colorado? Have we been fighting for this for a while?
You know, the Colorado's water law is basically first come, first served. The people who got here early and filed for the rights and put the water to use still have those rights. City of Denver filed for water rights in the Fraser Valley, upper Colorado area over 100 years ago, and we're still drinking that water today. And there are some people who take exception to that even to this day. You can understand both sides of this. Denver's been putting it to use. Some people over there saying, wait a minute, we weren't even here. So I'd explore some of those issues as well, because that's a very timely topic.
So we've got a fictionalized book, but we're going to get a lot of real history on
Yes.
Colorado water in that book.
Yes.
I love those kinds of books. That's wonderful. So Stan, tell me, does your wife have you working on any other books?
I am working on a historical novel right now.
Oh, another novel?
Yes, another novel. I'm actually having a lot of fun developing the characters and the dialogue and the plot. This is about the Moffett Railroad, the railroad that David Moffett built up through the hills to the what's now the Moffett Tunnel. Originally went over Rollins Pass and went out to Steamboat. Particularly some of the opposition that he received from the big money in New York City that didn't want to see another railroad in this part of the country. That's part of what was going on then too. People like Edward Harriman didn't want to see any competition in this part of the country and did his best to stop that. So
I have noticed that in addition to water rights, Colorado is a railroad sort of history here that we don't have in other parts of the country.
yes, the railroads really opened up the mining camps and opened up the settlement, the farmers, the water use. Very much an integral part of Colorado's history.
So we're going to get some of that same thing, that good story with some background history on that.
Well, you'll have to read the book to see.
That
Yes.
sounds great. That sounds marvelous. Stan, thank you so much for coming and sharing these wonderful books with us.
My pleasure.
Can't wait to see what you and your wife give us next. Thank you very
Great.
much.
Thank you. My pleasure.
You bet. I'd like to thank Anne Marie with her book, Letters to Anne, and Stan Moore with his book, Seesaw and Over the Dam, both wonderful authors that we had on today's show. Check your local library for the books that we've talked about on today's show, and join us next time for more on Off the Page.